All right. Hi, everybody. We'll wait just a minute or two because we had several signups, but as Kim just mentioned, it's Friday, so we expect not everybody to show up. And there's Mike, Adam. Hey.
Hey, Michelle.
Hey.
Hey.
All right. It is 12:01. Can everybody see my screen? Did somebody give me a thumbs up or something? Somebody in the audience that you can see my screen. Okay, cool. Thanks, everybody. All right, appreciate it. So welcome, everybody. Many of you know me, and several of you might not. My name is Michelle Thompson. I am the Certified Local Government Coordinator for Department of Archaeology and Historic Preservation. So certified local governments. I think most of you in here probably know what that means, but just in case, so certified local government, there's about 60 of them in the state of Washington. So they're historic preservation commissions that are certified or accredited by the National Park Service. So that's what I do at DAHP in addition to being the Main Street design specialist. So I also work with the Main Street program. And we are here today to talk about special tax valuation. Please hold questions to the end. If you have questions, you can go ahead and put them in. I think either the chat or the question and answer function, whatever, that's fine. And I think Kim is monitoring, and I'll be monitoring to see what questions arise. But if you could just hold them to the end, I'm going to go over the basics of the program. So just keeping in mind that this is a general audience. I know some of you are coming from Main Street, some of you are city officials, there might be building owners, CLG people here. So just to kind of give a broad overview, so I'm touching on stuff for everybody. If some of this stuff is things you already know, I apologize. Hopefully there's some stuff that you learn. And then we can get into questions at the end. I'm going to save some time for questions at the end. And then if you've got follow up about like real specific stuff for like your specific project that may not apply, to everybody here seeking knowledge, please feel free to call me or email. I've got my email address and phone number is going to pop up at the end of the presentation. So let's get started. So, special tax valuation. Why does it matter? I'm kind of probably preaching to the choir here a little bit, but historic buildings are economic assets. Preservation supports housing, business growth, tourism, and community identity. So the need, why do we have special tax valuation? So it used to be, before we got special tax valuation, that owners who rehabilitated historic buildings, they often faced higher property taxes after investing in them because you put money into a building, a historic building, to rehabilitate it, and the value of the property goes up. So you're paying more property taxes, right? That's how it works. So in 1985, the legislature in Washington state in the 1985 legislative session created special tax valuation. That was to encourage rehabilitation by reducing the property tax impact on improvements to historic buildings. And then you can find that too. You can Google it or ask me, or it's on our website. It's an RCW 8426 is the state law that talks about special tax valuation. So what is it really? So let's get down to a little bit more of the nitty gritty. What is it? What's the definition? So special tax valuation, it's a Washington state property tax incentives, and it allows the county assessors to reduce the taxable assessed value of a historic property. And this is done by excluding qualified rehabilitation expenditures, often just abbreviated to QREs, from the property's assessed value for up to 10 years. And in communities with a population of fewer than 20,000 located in an economically distressed county, property owners may qualify for up to two 7-year extensions. And so this just passed a few years ago. There was an update to the law to offer two 7-year extensions to communities or property owners that meet that in the under 20,000 and in economically distressed communities or counties. Um, Couple things just to kind of clear up a few misconceptions. I was just trying to think about, well, what are all the things that people kind of the misconceptions that people have about special tax valuation, the questions I get. So special valuation, it doesn't freeze property taxes. It temporarily excludes approved rehabilitation costs from the property's taxable assessed value during the special valuation period. Property taxes may still increase during this period as property values and tax rates change. So property values or your property taxes can still go up, but you're still going to get that special tax valuation during the period. Who can get special tax valuation? So eligible properties. So they can be either commercial or residential. And they need to be listed on either the local register, and that would be in a certified local government community. And if you've got any questions about if you're in a certified local government community, please go ahead and just contact me at the end. I think most of you on this call know that, but if you don't, please let me know and I can point you in that direction. And it's also for communities that have buildings listed on the National Register of Historic Places. So the rehabilitation of the building to qualify for special tax valuation, it needs to be substantial. And so that means that qualified rehabilitation expenditures, those QREs, what you put into rehabilitating the building, must equal at least 25% of the building's assessed value before the rehabilitation starts, excluding land value. A couple other things to keep in mind about special tax valuation. The rehabilitation project must be completed within the 24 months immediately preceding the application for special tax valuation. And we don't have any, DAHP does not have any way to give an extension, or there's just no extensions that we can do. This is a thing to do with the tax code in Washington State. We often have people say, oh, I didn't know, or I didn't, yeah, I've got stuff that was outside the 24 months. It was before. We do not have the ability to be able to do an extension. We just don't. Um, Property or a project can be completed in phases, but only the qualifying rehabilitation expenditures included during that 20-month application period are eligible. So if you do another phase, it's only within the 24 months prior that those are eligible costs. And then all phases of the project start from the assessor starts from the property's current assessed value. Here's an example formula on the screen to kind of break it down, how this might look. Um, so if the property was assessed prior to the rehabilitation, say at $200,000, the owner invests at least 25%, $50,000 of those qualified rehabilitation expenditures. I keep talking about those. We're going to talk about what those are in just a few minutes. And they have to follow the work has to follow the Washington State Advisory Council on Historic Preservation standards. We'll talk about that in a minute too. So then after the work is done, say the property is then reassessed by the assessor after the renovation, and now it's worth $250,000. So the assessor goes in and they minus those qualified expenditures. So they take $50,000 off of that newly assessed value. So if you had that reassessed value of $250,000, you get to take off that $50,000 or that 25% that you put in, and then you're back to the valuation of your property for property tax purposes is back to $200,000. Okay, mentioned this a few times. So the proposed rehabilitation must meet the Washington State Advisory Council's standards for rehabilitation. These standards emphasize repair over replace. They are very similar to the Secretary of the Interior standards. However, the Washington State Advisory Council's standards, they also include some language about maintenance of the resource. I'm not going to read verbatim what the standards are. You can look that up on our website. You can contact me. You can Google it. I'm not going to bore you by reading those verbatim, but just remember it's very similar to the Secretary of the Interior standards, repair over replace, and there is language about maintaining the property after an owner receives special tax valuation. Okay, a little bit about those qualified rehabilitation expenditures. So when you're putting money into the rehabilitation of a building, train, and when you're seeking special valuation, what are the costs that count right towards that? So the qualified rehabilitation expenditures for special valuation are the same as those allowed for the federal historic tax credit. So if anybody's done any work with the federal historic tax credits, it's the same qualifying rehabilitation expenditures. Um, those expenditures can be both hard costs and soft costs. And so here's a quick rule of thumb. I am not going to go into, again, I'm trying to not do text heavy. I'm not going to read verbatim everything. I want you to just kind of have a general idea of this, what's allowable. So this is kind of a quick rule of thumb for those qualified expenditures. Eligible examples: repairs, restoration, rehabilitation, building systems upgrades, um, stuff directly related to the rehabilitation of the historic building. Um, but even things like architectural fees, engineering fees, historic and preservation consulting fees. There's lots of stuff. It's just kind of an example of some of the things that are eligible. It doesn't just have to be the historic components of or the historic features of the building. I mean, we're talking, things like roofing and foundations and, HVAC systems, that kind of stuff. So it doesn't just have to be, the fancy cornice replacement or the plaster. Things that are not eligible, again, just some examples here, kind of the big ones: costs related to land acquisition, site work, landscaping, additions to anytime we're expanding the footprint of a historic building. That's going to not be an eligible cost. Furnishings, equipment, or purchasing of the property. So one of the rules of thumb for this that I just helps me kind of get my head around this visually, we say this quite a bit. If you took a historic building and you turn it upside down and you shook it around, anything that's still attached to the building is probably eligible for as a qualifying expense for the rehabilitation. Anything that falls out probably isn't. So, your dishwasher falls out, your furniture, that kind of stuff. Again, this is just a rule of thumb. This is not an exact science. When I say this, I'm not telling you, yes, this exact thing is eligible and this exact thing isn't eligible. You still always want to check and confirm that. But this is kind of a rule of thumb. Okay. So kind of how does it work? Who does what? The timeline. Um, this is again just kind of a very general thing, so that owner completes the rehabilitation work, right, that they've done within that 24 months. They submit the application, they submit it to the county assessor. Um, they need to submit the application by October 1st. The assessor then sends that over to the Historic Preservation Commission, or that will be reviewing the work, the changes to the buildings done for special valuation. So the commission reviews the application to determine that the work meets those Washington Advisory Council standards that we talked about that are similar to the Secretary of the Interior standards. And then the assessor then, once a contract is signed between the building owner and the local governing body, the Preservation Commission, then the assessor makes the determination of the reassessed value. So another thing to kind of keep in mind, this is a thing that trips people up. The special valuation becomes effective on January 1st, the year after it's approved, but the building owner won't actually see the savings until the following year's tax bill. So don't expect that if it's turned in by October 1st, then that you're going to see that, immediately at the beginning of the year. On the next year, you won't see it until the following year. Okay, another common question. If a property is sold, so if the new owner wishes to continue special valuation, they must sign required compliance documents and continue meeting the program requirements. So they're basically taking on the same agreement that the seller had with the Historic Preservation Commission. If the owner chooses to not continue the program, the special valuation ends, and any additional taxes would become the responsibility of the seller at the time of the sale. If a property loses special valuation eligibility, so that, if somebody violates that contract, if somebody gets special tax valuation and follows all those advisory council standards and then decides that they're gonna, demolish part of the building or switch out all the windows, they do something, right? That's in violation of the agreement that they signed. Um, the county assessor can actually recapture the tax benefits received by the person receiving special valuation, along with interest and a 12% penalty. So this is where we have a little bit more teeth with historic preservation, as we hopefully all kind of know. We don't have a whole lot of teeth with historic preservation in the United States. But when we have an incentive like this, financial incentives are often where we have a little bit of teeth, right? So the owner needs to comply with, these historic preservation standards in order to continue to get the benefit that they want. And then if they don't, they can lose the benefit, right? There's actually a consequence, which is kind of rare in historic preservation in the United States. Another thing to be aware of, and this is like a really cool, this is very typical. Special valuation is often stacked with other financial incentives, such as the federal historic tax credit. For those of you that don't know, the federal historic tax credit, it provides a 20% income tax credit for the certified rehabilitation of income producing historic buildings listed on or contributing to a national register district. So, unlike special tax valuation, which reduces property taxes, state property taxes, the historic tax credit actually reduces federal income tax liability. So, you see, there's a couple other differences there too. So, special valuation, just kind of highlighting this. In Washington State, special tax valuation can be used. I mentioned this earlier for a residence. It can be a private home or it can be a commercial building. It can be both. It's really rare to see financial incentives for people's private homes. That's exceedingly rare to see something like that. And so the federal historic tax credits, they're only for income producing buildings. You could with the tax credits you could have a rental property or something where it was actually income producing, but you couldn't just use it for your private home. And the special tax valuation can be used for either something listed on the local register, as we talked about, or with the National Register of Historic Places. These federal tax credits are only National Register of Historic Places, so there's some differences. Okay, and so I just wanted to show you a couple of the examples of this in Washington State. So from small residential rehabilitations to large-scale commercial redevelopments, real projects across Washington State are successfully using special valuation. Every year, I require the certified local governments to send me lots of information about, kind of what they've done in the last year. And one of the things they send me are all the properties that have gotten special tax valuation. And it's a lot more than I think people might realize. And it is all over, it is truly all over the state, anywhere, usually, especially where there's a certified local government program. We're doing special tax valuation. It's not just the big developments in, places like Seattle. So I love seeing this kind of stuff. Here's a private residence in Skokomish that got special tax valuation. Big difference. Mid-century modern commercial building in Puyallup. This was Puyallup's first time that they gave special tax valuation. I walked them through it. It was really fun for this building. Hotel Hardware in Dayton. Up there in the top corner, you can see that the hotel actually had a fire in the 1960s, and then the buildings next to it are no longer standing. But Hotel Hardware has become kind of a destination in Little Dayton, Washington. Some apartment buildings in Wenatchee, so same use. When we talk about too, and just to kind of emphasize that too, historic preservation is housing, and the special valuation is a incentive to help create housing or to keep housing that we have in historic buildings. The Elks Lodge in Bellingham, so it's now subdivided into rentable commercial spaces. Love this one too. Coopville Cash Store in Coopville. Now it's a Salty Vaughn's Waterfront Inn. Very cool. And a lot of these two also use, like I know this one and then the Elks building, they also used the federal historic tax credit. So they stacked them like we were talking about. Cheney High School. So I live in Cheney, outside of Spokane, Little Cheney, Washington. So Cheney High School, this building when we lived here years ago was in bad shape, and I was very concerned about its fate. And I came back, and it had been turned into the schoolhouse lofts, so a 34-unit apartment building, and it's mostly Eastern students. It's right across the street from campus, but yeah, so it created a lot of housing for our students in Cheney. And this also used the federal historic tax credits. And on the National Park Service's website, this is one of the, if you go to about the federal historic tax credits, this is one of the buildings that's featured on the National Park Service's website. So in Little Cheney, Washington. Another one, I just visited this a while ago. This is in Everett. So this was the Weyerhaeuser office building. This building has been moved several times, but it's now the Muse Whiskey and Coffee Bar. Super cool. So just kind of getting an idea of all these different uses, ways that special tax valuation has been applied around the state. Again, it's not just for the big fancy developments. I mean, that it has a place in that too, but people are using it all over the state for lots of different things. And then I'm going to open it up for questions. I know this hasn't been a super long presentation, but I hopefully will just have some time for some questions here if you guys have some questions. I want to talk to you just about a couple other things too. So this is part of the DAHP Academy series. You can see that we've had a couple that have already passed. So we're at July 17th with special tax valuation. This is our kind of lunch and learn that we've been doing, a series that we've been doing. Next one's coming up in August. So learning your building forms. I believe that's going to be Michael Hauser, our state architectural historian. September 16th, standards for rehabilitation. We've got something on building codes coming up. November 18th, split decisions, split level versus split entry. So some of these are really technical and some of these are really just kind of fun and informative. But yeah. And then there's a link at the bottom, but you can also find that on we advertise these on Facebook, and I'm pretty sure they're advertised on all of our social media, and they're on our website. And another thing I wanted everybody to know about too is that the Places Conference, this used to be Revitalize SWA, is coming up in Ellensburg, October 6th through 8th. I will be there. Several DAP staff will be there for that. So if you've got questions about this, want to register, registration is open now. Preservation Commission members in the certified local government communities get half off registration or 2 for 1. So let me know if you're interested. I can point you the way to sign up for that. And I'm going to leave it open for questions. So there's my email and my phone number. And then, so, anything kind of special tax valuation related, please feel free to contact me. And then we've got Geronimo Roldan. He's our state historical architect, and he's also the person that oversees the federal historic tax program. So if you've got questions for him, you thinking about stacking these things, we're always happy to get on and we do this all the time, kind of a joint Zoom meeting or whatever you want to do. But there's his contact and my contact. All of this stuff is on our website as well. So please, it's only 12:22, but please go ahead and ask any questions that you have if you've got anything. Anybody?
So we had a question in the chat just now, so I'll read it to you.
Go for it.
Amy asks, are there program differences between different municipalities?
Special tax valuation? Yes. Well, one of the biggest differences for the program differences is what a certified local government community, what buildings, they probably should have put this in the presentation. I apologize for that. What buildings are eligible. So your historic preservation ordinance will say or should say what class of buildings are eligible for special tax valuation. And some municipalities will say that it's just things listed on the local register, and some will say that they also offer that to national register. So you just want to look to see what class of buildings are eligible for special tax valuation in your community. Good question. Jean?
Jean has her
Yeah.
hand up. Yeah.
Go for it, Jean. Yeah.
Hi, Jean Sadehue at Everett Historical Commission. Question about, we're recertifying our historic districts now.
No.
Can we use, can we offer the link to this presentation to some of the neighborhoods or
100% Jean, please
yeah,
do. Yes, yes.
great. Because I think because we have to go door to door, I guess, and get everybody to buy in again for the overlays. It would be good for them to have this as something they can look at to
Sure.
give them an
Please,
incentive.
please do. And we've got lots of stuff on our we have a YouTube page for DAP too that has all of the other kind of DAP academies and other information too. There's a couple things on there. It's pretty or the page is pretty organized. There's a couple videos too just about local historic districts. Please feel free to share any of that stuff. And Jean, just know too that I am very happy to speak with anybody or, I know that I was just there and we had conversations about this just a couple weeks ago when you guys are updating your ordinance. But yeah, please feel free to reach out to me or any kind of help I can give or, stuff like this. I'm very happy to share links or anything.
Great. And there was another question, and one of the reasons I'm asking this is
Yeah.
just to
Mhm.
share some information too.
Sure.
If we have an overlay that has been certified and is put on the register, um, then all the homes are open to having the special valuation.
If you had a local historic district, that's a wonderful question. Thank you. If you have a local historic district, and in order to get a local historic district, if you're in a CLG community, you are going to need to follow I'm just saying this for everybody, Jane. I know you know this. You're going to need to follow a process in your historic preservation ordinance for creating a local historic district. And then once you actually do create a local historic district, it's usually by some kind of vote. Once you get a local historic district, every building, every property that's within that district that we call contributing to the district could potentially be eligible for special tax valuation. So that's one of the lures for getting on a local register or being in a local registered district in a community. So in the United States, I kind of touched on this a little bit. Our teeth aren't really super strong for historic preservation like it might be in other places, but our incentives are how we try to get people on board or kind of try to sweeten the pot a little bit for historic preservation. So yes, it can open it up. If you have a local historic district, it can open up special tax valuation to every property owner that has a contributing building in that district.
And just one final question. If there's a landmark or some sort of architectural feature that runs throughout the entire, I mean, for lack of a better, like we have a retaining wall that runs down along the whole street. We also, let's say if you had historic lighting or any kind of lighting, would those kind of things be eligible for special valuation as well if you wanted to add historical lighting in a district?
That's a thing. Let's get more into the weeds with that in a personal conversation because I don't want to just give a general answer for that without looking at your specific instance. So let's have a conversation about that. But in general, I will say that this is not if you've got a historic district or something on a local historic register or even the national register, that's not limited to buildings. So we see all kinds of things go on a historic register. I mean, we see grain silos and we lots of like canals and stuff, some of the old like ditches and canals, railroad lines, streets. It's definitely not limited to just buildings with historic preservation. So let's follow that up with a talk about that, Jean, like exactly what you're talking about, and let me help you work through that. But in general, it's not just buildings.
Great.
And a lot of people are surprised by that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great to know. Thank you.
Sure, of course. Yeah, yeah. More questions, anybody? You hear my cat yelling in the background, sorry. All right. Well, if nobody has any more questions, you know how to get in touch with me. And I love when you do. Always so happy to talk to all of you. And, there's not always a solution, but if there is one, we will find it for stuff. And, special tax valuation, it's not the end all be all, for historic preservation, but it is a tool. I mean, it is a really powerful tool, and it can especially be a powerful tool when it's stacked with other incentives. You know, sometimes we'll see projects that kind of couldn't get off the ground or couldn't be as good as they are without having received that some of these financial incentives for historic preservation. So it really can make a difference. And I hope that I've showed you with some of the examples, again, that this is being used all over the state. And, you know, and one of the things, you know, it tends to kind of not be highlighted as much, I've noticed in our CLG communities or just in general, that again, like people can use these for their homes. You know, a lot of times, and it's great. I mean, we use these for commercial and for downtown revitalization and stuff. That's wonderful. But you know, it's just another incentives to offer property owners and to, you know, get people to get listed on your local register. You know, so reaching out. I mean, if you've got property developers, you know, people that are flipping houses in your communities, and especially if you're kind of, you know, a little bit concerned about what those flips might look like in terms of, you know, historic buildings or historic neighborhoods, you know, reaching out to developers or people that are flipping and, you know, saying, hey, you know, this there's some incentives available. There's this one in particular, the special tax valuation. You know, would you be interested in, you know, listing it on the register, and then getting, you know, your confidence in terms of, you know, what it looks like to be listed on the register, what that means. You know, I mean, we can save some of the historic character of buildings while also offering some financial incentives. All right, if there's no more questions, I'm gonna let you all go. All right, thanks everybody, appreciate it.